Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Agascles Stamus and Dave Pecci back with another episode of It's Another Thing here on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Hopefully, my entire machine will not lock up like it did last episode, which has led to us having a lost episode. Episode number 1 of It's Another Thing was completely trashed when my machine locked up. I rebooted. I tried to get back into the still existing Hangout, but somewhere along the way, YouTube choked on itself, and it only recorded like 7 minutes of video. So this is our continuation of our entertainment series. I just couldn't think of a good title that was synonymous or somehow gave a nod to the subject matter at hand, which is Jessica Jones, Season 2. So on It's Another Thing, in the entertainment series, we do little bitsy podcast series, usually like 4 to 6 or 8 episodes per segment, covering what I call a short order form television series from either a network channel or via streaming media. So in other words, like the Marvel shows, which are kind of 13 episodes, BBC kind of shows, which are anywhere from 6 to 13 episodes, but any television content that is less than the North American US style of a 22 season series that runs from like September or October through May. So we do the short stuff, we do the short order segments, and we stack them up in a collection that's available on our YouTube channel. Mr. Dave Pecci, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm all caught up to I'm on episode 8 right now, and boy, what a surprise episode 3 through 6 was.
4 through 6, right?
Yeah, sorry, 4 through 7 for me. Just a turnaround. Like, honestly, Jessica Jones has managed to get back up to my number 3 spot, pushing, I think, Punisher down to number 4 on my top.
Nice. So
yeah.
So I'm in a similar place. We're going to talk a little bit about episodes 1 through 3 since we lost that conversation, which actually was a pretty good conversation. So I'm very regretful that we lost it.
Yeah.
But we decided to go ahead and move on. We'll talk about those shows a little bit, but then we'll primarily focus on episodes 4 through 6. So episodes 1 through 3 for me were a little. It's not entirely that they were lackluster, and in our Twitter feed and whatnot, we've seen our compatriots on Geeks Worldwide and the Scene the Nerd podcast, and we are an affiliate of the Geeks Worldwide Radio Network. They are our parent network, so we've seen the other entertainment podcasts on that on the primary channel, and everybody's kind of lukewarm about Jessica Jones Season 2. In some cases, people are outright negative.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, well, and at the outset, I was there too, right? The thing for me is Season 1, which I took a long time to come around to, but I did watch. Season 1, Kilgrave Kilgrave and the topic of Kilgrave and that content and the introspection it leads to is a very I'll use the word visceral because I can't think of anything else right now. It's a very visceral thing. It pulls at a lot of strings, and it's very, 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 very specific. You come around to this season, and this season, to me, is a lot more typical superhero, if I can say it like that. It's either, well, it's pointed in one direction or the other. It's either more typical superhero, more typical detective.
Yeah, this is what I definitely feel like. This is more of a typical detective type of. I mean, gosh, you hear that kind of jazzy detective background noise every so often. She's a PI. She's got and it's kind of like even the intros like AKA. It's like she's writing I forget it. I mean, man, you're older than me. I'm sure you know the old detective movies where they kind of have this noir type of style to them,
Yeah. And it definitely harkens to that. And I think that's synonymous with the book. Even down to, we're going to talk about it a little bit, but even down to the painting that Wildcat does in episode 6. Looks like a cover from, and I forget who the artists are. I know that the book was done by Brian Michael Bendis. Shame on me. When I was deep into comics, I used to specifically focus on artists and the art, even though I was really at my core a writer kind of guy. But the painting looks noir, and that's what the book reflected. You know, it wasn't this hyper realistic, like very defined, like Jim Lee kind of style. It was a very loose and undefined. I mean, just short of being kind of impressionist type of art style. And Jessica's features weren't very sharp, or you know. So yeah, they're getting to that. But I would even say it also feels like a superhero detective weekly, right? So there are elements of it that feel like a Greatest American Hero, right, or a $6 Million Man, right? These weekly kind of villain of the week shows that, because of the special effects capabilities of the 70s and 80s, weren't that robust, right? They didn't lean as heavily on those kind of, or even like a Wonder Woman to a certain extent. That was really about the episodic serialized mystery. And this is a little more serialized than episodic, but still I feel like that effect is the same. So it's different to me than season one. It is sharply different, but I'm liking it a little less because it's not as, up until this point, and we're going to talk about the pivot and the change, it hasn't felt as intense as the way season one felt. Anything of particular note in episodes 1 through 3 that we want to go ahead and talk about and knock that out? I mean, you have Simpson, who, AKA Nuke, who and if we didn't mention it at the top, Dave is usually really good about keeping me honest about this because I do very badly at it. But this is a spoiler show. This is for other fans of the show who have watched it or are watching it and want to be part of a discussion, digging into the deeper details. So we do have the death of Simpson, aka Nuke. He is killed. I think in the second or third episode.
Yeah, that was eventful. Like I kind of remember what we were talking about in our Lost episode. That I felt like episodes 1 through 3, it felt like close to the end of the episodes something would happen. So like episode 2, Simpson died. That was pretty huge. End of episode 3, we saw the chase with this mysterious, powerful lady. Wizard died, which was, in discovering the IGH facility. So a lot of that was, it felt like episodes 1 through 3 were kind of a slow burn, kind of like most of the Netflix. Thankfully, we only have 3 episodes of the slow burn, not like half of a season. That was one of my complaints with Luke Cage. Luke Cage, it felt like the same thing. The very first 3 episodes or first 4 episodes was more of a slow burn. And then after Pop's death, that's when the ball started rolling for Luke Cage. We got to, we saw all of that. So I feel like now that we've gotten out of, all right, we're all caught up. This is what Jessica's been up to. This is what Trish has been up to. Simpson's gone. Now I feel like we're on this whole new track of, the origins of IGH, the origins to Jessica's story. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like almost this season would have been better if it was first and then we had Kilgrave, because I feel like, where are you going to go for Jessica Jones season 3? If you've made this season an origin story, because I guess I feel bad because I haven't been following their comic books at all, so I don't know who the main villains are. I've only been following Daredevil, Spider-Man, and X-Men in the comics, so I don't know where they could go next with Jessica Jones, if there's another, huge plot that we're missing out on. Because I feel like IGH is going to be wrapped up in this season. And it's interesting because, like, for me to have a really good superhero TV show, I expect there to be a superhero and a supervillain. And I really don't feel that we have a defined villain in this. I feel like we have Chang, who's kind of a protagonist in his own way. We have this new lady, and then we have this Malrus. I forgot how you say his name. So anyways, I guess that was kind of a long-winded answer.
No, that's good because we kind of want to put episodes 1 and 3 to bed and then move on to 4. I guess a little bit of what I struggled with was the whole setup for this season, being that it is an origin story, which I don't know. I don't know if that depth of origin has been told in the comics. Unless they do a head fake in the comics as well, I've just kind of always accepted that the origin story is basically this is what went on in the background of the truck that gave Daredevil his powers, and it was this Jessica Jones story, and kind of much like kind of twins separated at birth, right? Matt Murdock goes on to be this great hero who's recognized by everyone. He has his own travails along the way, but Jessica, because of the Kilgrave thing, was largely maligned, right, after her assault on Scarlet Witch, which is what occurred in the comics. So it's just a little different. It definitely struck me as strange that they went after I'll call it a deep origin story, or kind of a hidden origin story. So I've struggled a bit to come around on that. But again, overall, I'm not completely in hatred of this topical matter.
No, it's very unusual, but it's not bad.
Right. And it's I think part of the what do I want to call it? I don't know. Part of the weirdness with me is this is typically the jump the shark moment in a long running series, right? If this were a long running TV show where they had given you an origin and all of a sudden they come back in like season 7 or 8 and go, oh no, here's what actually happened. We go, okay, I'm done, right? I'm out of here. They're digging for scraps trying to keep this thing going. So
and what I don't want to see is like an Arrow kind of thing where we keep coming back to her origin, and I don't want to find out that her brother and her dad are somehow alive now too, like if this is the season for her origin, then let's leave this as the season of her origin, and then hopefully that the next season is a setup for something new, something different.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty much, I guess. I mean, the other developments in that we see in episodes 1 through 3 are, and again they'll repeat themselves in 4, 5, and 6. Really liking Malcolm coming along. This is the afterword, if you will, the epilogue for Malcolm after the Kilgrave business got put to rest. I like what's going on with him. He's a nice addition to the show. I'm working through trying to understand exactly what it is he is struggling with, because obviously I feel like the big tell in this is that while he's recovering, the Kilgrave stuff did not leave him unscathed, right? So we got to come through that as well. But I really like what's going on with him. We have the reveal that Hogarth has a terminal illness, and she's just a piece of work. I'm very interested to see what goes on, because at first note I felt like, oh, okay, this is the setup to write her off of the show, which concerns me, because while she and Jessica are so similar but also so different, and I think one of the great things, particularly given who these actresses are, one of the great things is how they keep calling each other on their crap.
Yeah.
But then also concurrently themselves continue to make the exact, like, we'll turn around 10 seconds later and make the exact same mistake. So it is wonderfully hilarious in that. And one of the other things we mentioned in the episode 1 through 3 show was, I didn't understand that that's who Foggy was working for. So we have the scene where he comes in and just gets chewed out by Jerry. And that caught me a little bit.
And ironically, we haven't seen Foggy for the next 3 episodes. Like,
right. So, and yeah, and so that's the other thing I think that we mentioned in that lost episode was it's shockingly ignorant in an almost Marvel movie-like manner that they have not mentioned or talked about the other things, not only in the Marvel universe, but also in the Marvel Netflix universe, right? We're coming right off, as far as we know, this is after Defenders. We're coming right off. I mean, everybody was hit hard and emotionally. Again, spoilers if you haven't watched the full Defender series. Everybody was hit hard and dealing with emotionally the loss of Matt Murdock, as far as they know. And there's not a mention of him at all so far in the series or the other events in the Defenders. And that just always, it's an interesting creative choice that all of these directors and all of these creators, as we hear, and we understand Kevin Feige is theoretically orchestrating the whole thing. Again, like I understand the risk of crutching on that fan service and having like cameos by like all these other characters, but like that's part of there is a stripe of comic book people that's why we get into comics. Like nothing tickles my fancy more than reading a Daredevil comic by Charles Soule, right? And having like one page of 6 panels where Danny Rand shows up, right? And there's a conversation. He doesn't even have to be in costume, right? Just that little effect of making you feel like it's a universe, to me, is huge. And it always shocks me that that all of these, you know, I get what the CW and DC are doing, where they've said institutionally that's not a shared universe. But in Marvel, where it is, I don't get it. Like, so, but because what they don't do, it makes the universe feel small. Now, creatively, for Jessica Jones, with her being a PI, maybe that's deliberate because that world is supposed to feel a lot more like Mike Hammer or In the Heat of the Night, you know. So, but I don't know. I feel like that's everything, you know. And we also have, you know, Trish Walker stirring up a lot of her dead demons and sleeping demons, and what I want to say, and raising up a lot more of her past history and exactly kind of what went on between she and her mother. So it's interesting to say the least. So let's go ahead and start dealing directly with episodes 4, 5, and 6. So, all
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, let's see. So 4, I think I should open it up and look back, because what was the title for 4 again? Because I'm like blanking.
So episode 4 was AKA God Help the Hobo.
Oh, is that the one where they go and find the lady that knows about?
Right. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they pick up a lot of leads and actually progress the investigations. It kind of almost sets a new status quo, at least as far as the investigation into this murderer goes, or the investigation into IGH. And so they pick up the trail and determine that the person is homeless. And so they believe that she's living down, you know, by the docks or whatever. And at one point, Jessica, you know, basically says, you know, God help the hobo who stumbles upon her. So this episode opens with Jessica at anger management, at an anger management class after she was arrested last episode or brought in for questioning. And she has to serve time in this after work or whatever anger management class. Lots of people are there bringing up lots of horrible things. Jessica's primary problem is she's stuck in this class when she should be out tracking the murderer down. Like I said, I can't remember exactly what happened at the end of episode 3, but I think she was questioned by the police and punched a wall or a table or something, and they sent her to anger management. So again, as you mentioned, really great touches of noir here. It's always been one of the best things about the character. But throughout these 3 episodes, there's a lot more of Kristen Ritter in a room, walking around investigating, and then them ghosting and fading out her image, and then having her fade in, in a different spot in the room. So there's all those kind of great, kind of kitschy detective story kind of things. We also see more about Oscar, who I continue to call Wildcat, because that's just how I make sure I remember who he is. I can't remember the actor's name, but he is the actor who played Wildcat on season 2 of Arrow. And in episode 4, we encounter his wife, and a lot of what the show will deal with is this back and forth also between Wildcat and Jessica, and the fact that quite honestly, he blames a lot of his problems on Jessica at this point in the show. And one of the things, before I turn it back over to you, one of the things that is a particular note in this show, because it is a female-led show, in fact, it's the only female-led property right in the entire MCU, right?
Right. Yeah.
You could say that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has turned over to be less about Coulson and more about
Daisy Quake. Yeah.
More about Daisy. But this is a firmly planted female-led show. A vast majority of the lead characters in the cast are also women. So Jessica,
Trish,
and Hogarth,
right?
As well as some of the antagonists as well. But one of the things that's a particular note in the show is this show has some particularly weak male. Like I almost question if creatively.
That's true.
That's a deliberate edge to the show, right? That in all these shows, all the characters have some level of character flaw, but like almost to a T. Like I felt like Oscar was very weak in this episode because he was blaming Jessica on all of his problems. Kilgrave had a lot of weaknesses, thinking that Jessica could actually have feelings for him from last season.
Simpson had his issues.
Right. It's like it's like any male that they spend any time on is like just one of the weakest, has some of the biggest character flaws and weakest dispositions of many characters portrayed on television today. So how about you? What else from AKA God Help the Hobo did you find interesting of note, good or bad?
I think it was episode 5, but this is going back to in our last episode. I kind of talked about, and I even feel it stronger now in episode 4 and 5. I had the specific feeling that Hogarth, they were going to find some way to get the IGH thing or whatever. That was my original guess, that they were going to find the serum and give it to Hogarth and maybe see if it can save her. But now we find out, I can't remember if it was episode 4 or 5, that the nurse that they find who has been staying in Hogarth's apartment says, okay, I found your medicine. I know what you're suffering. I know why you want me here. And it turns out I know of a guy who can cure you of your ailment. And so I really think, to me, it didn't make any sense that they would write off Hogarth, because like you were saying, she's one of the 3 strongest female characters, not only in the Netflix universe, but in Jessica Jones.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like with these, particularly your high-profile actors and actresses on these shows, though, the problem is that they're high-profile actors and actresses. They have other things that they may have to go do. Lots of them have competing schedules with other projects that they're working. So it's just, you never know. So I caught that. Yeah, and as much as you can, please keep in mind I haven't seen episode 7. So, but yeah, so she brought that up, and my head is spinning too about like who. I guess nothing springs to mind immediately on who is a healer in the Marvel universe, who this character might be, or that they just might be somebody, nondescript and somebody made up for the show. We haven't really, because have we seen? Well, so in the Netflix universe we haven't, but we've seen kind of some nods to the Morlocks on The Gifted.
Yeah.
Because at one point I was like, oh, is this a Morlock? But yeah, and I can't. And part of me thought about like Power Pack and like Franklin Richards, and just in terms of my mind racing about who this healer could be, but I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. But I did think that was a very interesting twist. And actually, if she is on the show, makes it a little bit cleaner. Like one of the things when it's a medical procedure, it gets messy if you forget it and don't deal with it. Like I've been trying to get caught up on Arrow, and I just watched one episode from this season where the fact that Felicity has a device implanted in her spine that allows her to walk, because they tried to kind of Barbara Gordon her during the season with Damien Dark. Completely forgot about that had ever happened, right? And so it's kind of messy when you don't deal with it, and it becomes tropish if then you don't deal with it periodically, and then you just kind of pull it like a cat out of the bag. Same thing here. The whole time I'm thinking, man, if she goes in and she has a medical procedure, then like what are the ramifications of that? Do they keep dealing with it? Do they not? So yeah, but if she just gets healed by this superpower being, then yes, then that can just happen and they can be done with it and move on. So, also in episode 4, Cheng mentions that as he was doing investigation and research on Malcolm, that Malcolm has some father that is of note. And I can't tell if the father is like a press magnate, like owns a newspaper or something like that, but I thought he said something about him being a writer or something, but he mentioned how much of a disappointment Malcolm must be to his world-famous father. So I'm very interested to see where that goes and see if that, again, also ties into some of the canon of the Marvel Universe.
Who his father could be.
Right, and see if it wraps back around on some of the canon. In this episode, we also have Jess and Trish going back to confront, I can't remember his name now, but the movie mogul who had an affair with Trish when she was underage, and punches a hole in his car. And I felt that was very representative of Jessica being significantly more out of control than she has been in the past. Like, the thing that I noted in episode 6 is when she breaks the guy's golf club out on the golf course. Like, there's always this inherent undercurrent of pettiness and spite involved with her. And that to me is a representative of her control, right? That she, in interacting with other people who are kind of bad people, right, in the city of New York. I also feel like a little bit of the show is just also showing how 90% of humanity is just bad. But she always does something to be the itch under their skin, right? When they don't help her out as much as she would like, or she always feels it necessary to somehow level everyone's karma. Like that's part of her reason for being. But that's also always under a lot of control. And she definitely showed that this business with IGH, to a certain extent, more so than last season with Kilgrave, is causing her to spin and spiral a little bit out of control. And it almost seems, again, they kind of put these pieces in place in episode 1 and 3. It seems like the after effect of the Kilgrave episode, the fact that she is seen as a hero, is creating additional pressure on her that she can't handle.
This episode, I feel like I've always talked about these Netflix episodes are clearly for a more mature audience. I don't think I would show this to. I honestly don't think I would show Jessica Jones to anybody who's probably not 18 years or older, or not recommend it, because there's hints of dealing with depression in there and anger, and you know, and drug addiction has, I think, continues to be a strong topic in this. So with that being said, it's powerful because, we just finished episode 1 where Malcolm finished gets over his drug addiction. And now we see Trish has her own drug addiction. And, it's really weird to me too, Trish's drug addiction, right? Because I wanted to say, like, I try to always say, there's a cause and there's a correlation, because I wanted to say, oh, well, Simpson passed, now she's flipping out, and that's what the cause was. But I don't necessarily think that's what flipped her into using Simpson's enhancer. I think there's something else going on in Trish. Maybe it's the fact that she feels powerless. She's trying to be like Jessica, and she's trying to make a difference, and she doesn't want her mom's help. She doesn't want Jessica's help. And we constantly see her being pushed aside so she's not a victim. And, with the whole thing with Simpson, she didn't want Simpson watching her back. She wanted to be able to protect herself. And so now she's addicted to this drug because that gives her out. Which is very similar to, like, many people because I studied a bit of drug addiction as a sociology major, and it's people want to be out of their reality, and they want to feel like somebody else. So that's why they go on their high or their trip.
No, nice, very, very nice analysis and assessment. I don't know what the heck's going on with Trish. She is also out of control, and in another part of the back and forth is, while I talk about how the show seems to represent men as very weak-willed beings, each of the women definitely tears. I mean, in some cases, maybe worse. In this zone of 90% of the time they are in control. They're very intense, and they get their, they always get their man kind of thing. But the 10% of the time that they're off the rails is like very, 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 very bad, right? And so I don't get Trish. I guess one thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm definitely struggling with this as well, is, again, I'm always for more, right, of Marvel continuity in these shows. When Trish was on the show, number one, I was excited because there is a connection between Jessica Jones, Hellcat, and Jennifer. I forget what her last name is in the comics. She-Hulk. And I was like, oh man, if they could bring, like, again, one of those things that I would love, even if she wasn't powered up, right? Jennifer Walters.
Yeah.
And even if she just showed up as a lawyer, and I guess maybe that's kind of where they are with the positioning of that triumvirate with Hogarth. Hogarth is maybe the Jennifer Walters kind of surrogate, although her personality is completely different. But I keep wanting there to be this path for Trish to be some form of Hellcat. And I feel, but I feel like this drug addiction thing and what they're doing with her kind of starts to barricade that off, and that's unfortunate. Because I'm like, I would love to see her become either powered or even kind of pull, a Black Canary on a Laurel Lance Black Canary on Arrow, where she just becomes a skilled fighter, and dons a mask. That to me would be great. But it seems like they're walking a different path with that. So I feel a little unfortunate from that perspective. you mentioned the addiction part. That is definitely a strong theme of the show. And one of the things
I've told. Oh,
yeah,
I agree with you totally. I would love to see, because we're people who understand the comics, and for us, we would appreciate, more if this Netflix universe felt more like the comic book Brooklyn universe that we know, where there's a Jennifer Walters, where there's a Spider-Man that would pop in, maybe once in a while to the Netflixes. I mean, that's probably super far-fetched, but yeah, I'm totally there with you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I struggle with is I mentioned, there's this pivot that the show has done thematically from the type of threat that Kilgrave represented, and I'm not against some of the themes, but I struggle with the why, and maybe the issue is that I just haven't gotten the sense where I've felt like they're all interwoven together. Addiction is definitely a big theme of this, but I don't know why. Like, I could see if it was a problem with the titular character. Maybe it is because she's a heavy drinker, but they've given strong reasons why she's a heavy drinker, right? You're the only survivor of a car crash with all of your family. I get why you might drink at night alone when you come home. So I haven't necessarily wrapped my mind around the why of it, although obviously, Malcolm has his, Trish has hers. There's this other whole topic of Trish constantly going after, being attracted to bad men. One of the most interesting addictions this season for me is Malcolm's replacement addiction, which I also haven't completely put my finger on. My suspicion is that which is a unique thing because it's not dealt a lot with in media. I think there was a John Hamm film or a Fassbender film maybe a few years ago that dealt with it, but I think Malcolm appears to be addicted to sex, and so every episode
that's true,
showing up with a different partner, and I think it's clear that he's doing that again as an aftermath of the Kilgrave thing, and then there's the in episode 6 titled AKA FaceTime. There's this little back and forth between he and Trish, and that culminates. One of the most interesting things in that episode, I thought, and I appreciated it so much, was that Oscar and Jessica get together, but they don't go graphic with it. Because we talked about this in Punisher, right? That there were,
and I was super appreciative of that because I was hoping for once maybe that there could be like a normal relationship where, it doesn't always happen where two people instantly have sex. There's usually a build-up, and it's nice to see a real. I mean, it was more like I even want to say there's more of a build-up with Luke Cage and Jessica before there was something happen, and it's nice to see that again.
Yeah, absolutely, and I was glad to see not the repeat of the stuff in the Punisher where there were, there were some sex scenes that like I just didn't understand like why that was necessary, and it started to feel a little gratuitous. So I was glad to see them veer away from it because if they had that scene, that episode, I would have been less impacted by the scene between Malcolm and Trish. So I thought that was a neat bit of artistry there. So just trying to look back through my notes here of things particularly to pick out. Again, I like this effect of Malcolm kind of becoming Jessica's understudy, and there's in episode 4 there's a big blow up where Malcolm like comes storming in with Jessica and is like, "You're not going to keep treating me this way. You can't keep pushing everyone away. You need help. Maybe you feel like you don't need me, but I need this after the Kilgrave thing. We're all trying to heal." And Jessica actually just sits there and listens and finally says, "Okay." And he's like, "What?" And and he comes in and storms in and says he wants like 25% of all the cases. So this is a little bit of this sensei thing, right, with Jessica, where I feel like even though her front-facing character is all about ignoring what people say, I actually feel like she's been listening to Malcolm and trying to help him through what he's dealing with. And I think this was all about bringing him to a point where she just didn't want she wanted him to not treat his position at A-List Investigations as a charity, which he has been doing up to this point. He has been acting like he's offering his services to Jessica because she needs it. But there's a lack of cleanness in it, right? Because there's not a clear line of compensation. So I kind of like this clearly, where he really becomes like her associate investigator at Alias. I thought that was pretty cool. We also get in episode 4 a key character turn point where Hogarth has found out that she has ALS. She has a dispute with Price Chen, and a thing he says, and he doesn't know what's going on. He says as he's walking out, his last barb that he fires is, the Jerry Hogarth that I know would have never ceded control. And I thought it was a poignant thing, because there are things in life, I think, that you eventually deal with that are, it's easy to get motivated. I shouldn't say easy, but there's a path to getting motivated to pushing back against people, right? People keeping you down, people not giving you opportunities, things of that nature, because there's a human being to fixate on. But when things happen to you and it is this unassailable, non-malevolent force of nature, it's hard to find the soul to be a fighter. And we get that, delivered to Jerry Hogarth, and she takes off and now launches on this thing where she's going to fight this disease. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then, of course, at the end of episode 4, we get Jessica arrested, and she sees the body of the person that the killer has murdered, and her concern this whole time has been that the killer represents something she could become, and she rails against that a little, with the closing line, that's not me at the end of the show.
That's definitely, I definitely see that line, and I like that. That's a good theme.
Cool. So episode number 5, aka the Octopus. One of the reveals here, not reveals, but bit of trivia is, again, they continue through the investigation to try and track down what's going on, and they get a lead on a doctor who apparently treated people in the facility. I can't remember the actor's name again. I didn't have time to look the stuff up. But he is the first Cylon that is discovered on Battlestar Galactica, the more recent iteration of the series. So that's what sprung to mind when I saw him. But also in this episode, which I don't have a lot of notes on, but I tell you, best scene in the entire series, in my opinion, is the scene between Jessica and Detective Malone when she's being released from police custody. The other detective, an African-American woman, doesn't believe that she's innocent. She feels she's working together. I do love the canonical nod where the detective goes, "I know how you people work. I know how you team up," which is a nod to me. It's a nod to Marvel Team Up, which was an old comic where they used to randomly take characters from the Marvel universe every month and just mash them up in a team up, just team off one-off story. But that detective doesn't believe her. Detective Malone does. There's a scene, after Hogarth and the other detective have left, just between the two of them, and Jessica is trying to understand why he, of all people, is giving her a chance. And he says, I have memories of what happened in this precinct with Kilgrave. I have memories of holding a gun to my head. I have memories of my finger on the trigger. And he mentions that it's this horribly psychologically scarring event, and just makes a joke and says, I'd recommend you try hypnotism. And he says, I don't need to. The nightmares stop the day that you put that guy in the ground. And I was a little choked up because people talk about Jess and her being a hero, but nowhere in the series have we gotten that heartfelt of a admission of what she did and what that meant to one of Kilgrave's victims.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge transformation. I think that we're seeing with Jessica, and it's amazing, how she starts to treat Malcolm and how and I think we're gonna see a whole new Jessica who's matured, who's gotten through a lot of her anger and depression in episode 3, and it's gonna be a different type of person. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how she is now that she's, dealt with some of these past issues. She's dealt with Kilgrave and what happened to her. She's going to be dealing with her past, she's starting to treat her friends better, and it's going to be interesting, it's cool because, right, you want to see somebody's recovery through all of these things. And so in a way, she's a hero in 2 ways. She's the one that takes down the bad guys, and she's also a hero because she's overcome a lot of her own trials.
No doubt. And that brings us nicely and roundly around to dealing with the digestion of the whole Jessica Jones Season 2 phenom, which is this. So she's shown up 3 times. Of all of her 3 appearances, this feels like the most grounded, street-level story that we've told around Jessica. And so, yes, what's currently going on is a threat, but it's not Kilgrave and the potential impact of what happens if that guy is allowed to run loose. It's not the 5 fingers of the hand and what happens if she and the other defenders don't stop them. So stakes, right? Stakes often form a lot of how a story is presented and how it's digested and how we feel about it in the journey from the beginning of the story through the middle to the end. This story right now doesn't have as high a stakes as Jessica's first 2 appearances. And in fact, it's part of, to me, what makes it more of like the Mike Hammer noir. It's kind of a Jack the Ripper story, right? There's this crazed murderer running around the city.
Yeah.
Right? She's the only one who has a thread on it. And to a certain extent, other than like the superpower stuff, there's really not much more to it than that. But it's also more deeply personal to Jessica than the other 2 stories have been. Kilgrave was a thing, but this is actually getting beyond Jessica. And I think if there's an element that is potentially contributing to people's lukewarmness on its uptake, that may be it, because I think a lot of people, ourselves included, I think I can see how a lot of viewers of this feel, and it kind of makes the selection of Kilgrave as the villain in season 1 a bit questionable. Once you defeat Kilgrave, what more story is there for you to tell? Right?
Right. Yeah.
That's arguably representative of like the worst thing that can happen to a human being is they had a little bit of this in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation too, is that it's one thing to have your body violated, to have your mind violated and be driven to do things that you wouldn't do, and to be placed in this state of you can see it and you're aware of everything that happens, but you can't stop yourself from doing it. There's probably nothing that feels more violating. And once you defeat that kind of evil, what other story is there for you to tell? I think this season is trying to reach beyond that, and I think it's hard. It's almost like staring at an android, right, that looks uncannily human, right? It's like I'm trying to get to your story and feel like I can digest it, but I can't, because I already labeled the first story you told as like the ultimate thing to do on TV. And of course, what we get at the end of this episode is the reveal that the murderer, and who Jessica has been tracking this whole time, as far as we know, is actually her mother. And at this point, and this is the final question that I'll leave you to talk through for our remaining time, is number one, when that came out, I was totally short-circuited. I was like, really? Like, what? And I'm like, why are we doing that? Right? it's kind of the Boba Fett effect, right? Nobody wants to see a Boba Fett prequel because nobody wants to know the mystery behind Boba Fett, because half of what that character is the mystery and the fact that you don't know. And so I haven't been able to settle on what I think about that. You've gone to episode 7. I haven't yet. So locked in this moment in time. I don't know if I like it. I don't know. There's a thing you do when you take a story to a point where I go, again, like I said, I'm done. I don't really care. Like you've made it so bombastic that I don't know why I care at this point. Like you mentioned on Arrow, it would kind of be like if they came on Arrow and said that his dad was really still alive, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so you've made me feel this way for 5-6 seasons. Like, why would I care now? So my series of questions for you are: do you like it? Do you care? A question that I haven't been able to answer yet, which is, what kind of story is this that we're telling this season? Is it about closure? Because season 1 was largely about closure. Is it about redemption? Because we have redemption shows on TV. We know what those look like. My question is, what is the point of taking that plot turn? Is the story of this season a tragedy? Is it going to wind around to be the fact that Jess has thought that this person was gone, now she's got her back, but at the end of the day, she has to put her down? Or is this a story about family, which puts it kind of in that vein of The Flash, which is about strong family ties, Supergirl as well. So have at it.
So I think my feelings didn't change with episode 7. I think episode 7 only concreted what I felt. I mean, it's a really hard thing. Like, what would you do? I mean, if you wanted to have your mom back all your life, but you find out your mom was, or your parent was Hitler or something, like, would you care? What would you do with that? So I personally liked that reveal that her mom was still around, and it made a lot more sense too, like that they were sort of hinting to that, like, but we didn't catch on to it. So I do like it. I do care about it. I think it's a moral dilemma that has to be dealt with. This is my mom, but she's also a killer. I am not a killer.
So in the vein of me asking my question, like, what's the point? What are we doing? What kind of story are we telling?
I think this all relates back to Jessica and her dealing with her issues and her identity.
Okay, but at the end of the day, you feel like the story of this season is the test, right? What do you do when faced with the ultimate choice between love and defeating evil?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. No, that's good. This is why I like having these talks, right? I don't know that I would have arrived there in terms of intellectual angle until like episode 12, right?
Yeah. And so for me now, I feel okay. So is this person a villain? I would say somewhat, because it's hard because I'm a sociology major, and it's like you look at some people that have been driven to crime. If a mom ends up, stealing food for her starving baby, is she a bad person because she did that? Do you still punish her for that? I mean, in this sense, she's been experimented on. So obviously, it wasn't directly her wish to kill people. I mean, people could debate that too. She was always a killer and this just let it out in her. I would say no, like this experiment is what caused her to be a killer.
So you feel like this is a little bit of the Frankenstein thing, but because even with that question,
it's a gray area if you classify her as a villain or not, is what I'm trying to get at. Like,
yeah.
And even then, like, I don't know. It's so a gray area. Like, I don't want to say like there is a villain there. I just want to say it's a villainous plot, right? Because in a sense, she is a killer, and so that's the problem. So, anyways, going back to your question, I honestly don't know what to expect, what's going to happen. I honestly, she has to be dealt with, I feel like. I mean, there's three ways that this could go down, She could totally be healed of her problems. And even if she is healed, is she still accountable for her actions? And number three, who's going to make that decision? Who gets to decide what happens with her? Who is the judge, jury, and executioner? So yeah, you're right. It's kind of like a Frankenstein story. So it is. I think it's very similar to that. And I was just kind of blown away. Like episode 7 was just like, it even just solidified my feelings even more. It's like, it's so hard though, because I feel for Jessica. Because honestly, for me, if I was put in that spot, it would be tough. It's like, it's what do you honor more? Do you honor family or do you honor doing the right thing?
Yeah, and it's also, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. It's also very representative of the difference. I still don't really particularly care for the lack of crossovers and cameos, but it is indicative of the difference in the stories that are being told between the MCU, the Avengers on the big screen, and what's being told here. Yes, like the whole Winter Soldier stuff is a little, you deal with like what's really evil. Like you mentioned, what's the definition of a villain? Should people be held accountable for things that they've done, whether or not they were in control or not, whether or not they've turned over a new leaf or not? But I will definitely say that the stories that are being told on the Netflix shows are more messy, right? They're a little more complicated. There's a little more edge to them. This is not the type, right? If you put this story with a Steve Rogers, you get a very clear cut. This is right. This is wrong. This is what's going to be done about it, right? And everybody who disagrees with me, you're all wrong because I'm Captain America, right? Which I appreciate. I love those stories. But this story, because of the people that are involved and there not being as clear a definition of right, wrong, and in between, you get what we have here, which is a highly complicated, highly complex story to be told and dealt with. So yeah, I think it's, to me, and again, a lot of the opinions that I've seen of a lot of our friends who have been lukewarm on seeing the resolution of Jessica Jones season 2, they're further along than I am, than we are, because I don't hoover this stuff up right away. So I'm hoping that it maintains through. I mean, the same thing like with Punisher, right? Punisher definitely traversed the bell curve, right? Like it slow burn, it picked up, it was solid in the middle, and then to me, it kind of waned as we got towards the end. I'm hoping we don't see that with JJ season 2, but it remains to be seen, obviously. I will say right now, episodes 1 through 3, I felt a skosh above. Like, I also talk about how there are these things that I watch because I'm obligated to, right? Like, I watched X-Men 3 because I had to, right? Because I'd watched 1 and 2, they were great. I had to watch the third one. There are shows that I'm not particularly crazy about, but eventually I'm going to watch all of Game of Thrones, not necessarily because I want to, but because I feel obligated to finish that whole series. 1 through 3, I felt like I was obligated to watch because I had watched season 1, but it didn't particularly excite me, right? Going from it was kind of a skosh above a thing I had to do. At the end of episode 6, I'm definitely excited to see where the story is going. Because I'm interested in seeing what the character and moral struggles are. I really kind of love the story of Hogarth, and maybe it's because I'm older. I need to look. She it's possible that she's at the age fictionally that I am, and I'm definitely in the zone where I have to start considering, like, when I get sick or something goes wrong or something doesn't feel right, I'm like, oh, wait a second, is that a thing, or is that just like a thing that'll clear up in a week, right? So I'm very interested to see that story. I'm very interested to see how Trish is going to wind up. And I'm loving the story probably more than anything about the growth of Malcolm. But I'm also interested to see how this mystery unfolds with, what is this deal with her mother coming out of hiding. So
that's interesting. You brought up the whole Winter Soldier thing, because it's very similar. It was against his will that he did all these terrible things when he was under Hydra's control. So that said, I feel like that, even though it's hard to say, she has free will, though. That's the thing. I don't believe there's any mind control involved with the mother. I think that's why we might end up seeing her more accountable than the Winter Soldier is. And it's also Jessica Jones, so it's not going to get that Captain America happy ending. I don't
Right. Right. It's not going to be super clean A/B plus minus on the way to the end. So
yeah.
So I think, Dave, that's going to do it for us for tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining in. A great analysis and assessment on your end, Dave. You definitely shared some things that I hadn't considered. Once again, this has been the E2KG Network. It's Another Thing, which is our continuing podcast series, micro series, mini series, if you want, covering short order form, micro seasonal content across all the different networks. This has been Dave Pecci and Agasically Stamus here covering Jessica Jones Season 2. We will be back. So, hey, one thing you got to get used to if you've watched this at all, and we do this for a specific reason, right? This is not necessarily a sit down on every Wednesday night and watch this live show, or check every Thursday to see if it's available for download. We construct the entertainment series on the network to be highly flexible in comparison to the other shows, which are kind of fixed and don't float as much because it involves a few more people, and it's harder. We kind of have to go when we have to go. So we should be back in a week and a half, sometime, to talk about episodes 7 through 9. It will be close to a normal pattern, but we've shifted things a little around. So Dave and I got to talk about how we contend with that further on. So, but you can always check in on our Twitter feed at E2KG Network, all one word, and get the latest, or ask if you want to know. Post a comment in this video on YouTube, and check in and let us know if you're curious about when the next episode is going to drop. So it should be somewhere, and it will definitely be in the next week to 2 weeks. So thanks so much for joining in. That's going to do it for me. On behalf of myself, Dave Pecci, and the E2KG Network, this is episode 2 of It's Another Thing, and that's a wrap. We're out of here.